friends. Welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm Mr. Forest. I'm coming to you today from down in southern Utah. I got down here after coming back from the European touring and our little run in Denver in California. And it's just been like, this is the first maybe day I've had to just take a breath. And so I'm certainly grateful to be down here, but definitely feeling the need to breathe deeper, as it were. It was an amazing experience, but a very full and rich experience. I mean, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who showed up for the shows. Most recently in Denver and San Diego. I mean, those ceremony concerts were awesome. And it really warms my heart to continue on that path and hope to see you all again soon. And speaking of shows, I'm going to be in Portland, Oregon on May 15th, really soon. And that's going to be a seated show at the Old Church, which is one of my favorite venues in Portland. They have this cool pipe organ there and a beautiful concert grand piano, and it's really, really nice acoustics and a cool setting. So grab a ticket for that intimate show if you're in the area, or if you know someone. I'd love to get the opportunity that they don't miss it if you think someone you know should be there. It's been a few years since I've been back to play there. So that's on May 15th in Portland, Oregon, and we're going to be in Los Angeles. We just ticketed the event for May 21st. And that's a really epic event. That's a ceremony concert, so you get to lie down for that one. And John Hopkins is going to be there, as well as Superposition. So I just did a collaboration with Superposition you may or may not have heard, called Dissolved and Dissolving, and then the collaboration with John Hopkins for his album Music for Psychedelic Therapy. And I think it's going to be like a 4-hour type continuous event. So a very deep experience, and I'm overjoyed that John's able to join us from over the pond. And so I'm looking forward to that. May 21st, Los Angeles. So you can get tickets for those right now while they last at eastforest.org/tour. And we will be adding more dates. We've also just announced, as far as retreats are concerned, we'll be back at the Esalen Institute. That's limited to just 40 people. That's July 1st through 4th. Those are also super special. I mean, who doesn't like hot springs and the Pacific Ocean majesty and diving into lots of sonic landscape and inward dives? Rada will be there as well, doing our movement practices and much more. And Rada and I will also be doing another Ram Dass retreat, but this one's in North Carolina, and it is in later in August. So that's also on sale too, all at the website, eastforest.org. I also want to say a thank you to our Patreon members. We just had a nice East Forest Council gathering on Zoom last night. Those are always so beautiful. I'm just amazed by how people show up for that, how powerful it is just to witness one another. And then we usually do a musically guided meditation that I do live. But there's other tiers on the Patreon. I call it the Council on Patreon. It's a great way to support the podcast and support the project in general, as I don't do other kind of outside ads for this podcast. So I want to say thanks to Benjamin and Blake L. and Juliana for signing up recently. We have two of them signed up for as Council Cubs. That's our just $4 a month. And then we've got a council member that is a higher tier that gets you into these monthly Zooms. But I like to share a lot of demos over there. I just shared a track from Dublin that was live that I thought was kind of cool and special. And I don't really have another way to release that right now or even share it. So that's where I shared it. So if you're into that kind of thing, check it out, patreon.com/eastforest. And thank you everyone for the support, the reviews of this podcast, and for sharing it when it feels right to you. This week, I have a conversation with Jamie Kilstein. He is a comedian and provocateur of general sorts, a really funny and fun guy, and he's been on a beautiful journey that we've been tracking a bit together since 2 or 3 years. Beginning of COVID, we connected. He's been on the podcast before. Really happy to have him back. He put his foot into the waters of music, and he did this really interesting spoken word piece called The God One that I will play at the end of this podcast, but I encourage you to go find it. I believe it will be released this Friday on DSPs like Spotify and Apple and so forth, and hear it in a little higher quality and help support them by giving them some streams. But I thought it was awesome. It's like the musicality in it, particularly the drumming, as you'll hear us talk about, it's incredible. So definitely check that out. And we have a great conversation about creativity and the parallels between comedy and music. And it's always easy and fun to talk to Jamie. So I know that you are going to enjoy this very much. Otherwise, I don't know about you, but it feels like we're living in worlds that are in multiple worlds at once. I've said this before, but it just is ringing so true for me right now, how we're holding conflicting, dualistic emotions and feelings concurrently. There's so much change and collapse in our world, and like it's so clear that there's no such thing. I mean, there never was of going quote unquote back to a state or to a world that we once were. It never has been that way, but certainly now things are so untethered that it feels sometimes like we're in free fall. This is something that came up in the council yesterday. And I was remarking to myself, I was like, when you're falling, free falling, when we say that phrase, it encodes in it too that when you're falling, you're free. You are untethered, and untethered in a positive sense of saying there's infinite possibility, and you are kind of ultimately in the flow because there's nothing that you're holding on to, or whether you want to or not. And it's a state of virgin creation, of as Bio would say, of the becoming. And most definitely something is becoming right now, and we're all swirled up in the middle of it. But I think it's normal. I just want to voice that I feel, and I'm guessing sometimes you are feeling that there's moments in your life where you do feel grounded or excited about certain things, but simultaneously you feel deeply concerned and anxious and worried about other things at the same time. Maybe the same thing. That's okay, and that's normal. So I encourage you to just feel it all, but to feel that untetheredness and to feel the free fall as a form of flying, and to not be attached to like that it's different or that you don't know exactly where it's going, because ultimately you are free. You are free. You are free. And there's so many things telling us that we are not. Anyway, as the wind blows out here and the sun is shining, I'm grateful for the springtime, and I'm grateful for everything that's becoming and these cycles that happen again and again. And it's great to witness them down here. So let's get into this conversation, though, with our good friend, Jamie Kilstein.
Right. God also likes to kick it there. Nature. Not walk through a field, face glued to a screen, swiping through an app that somehow found a way to commodify love, but like nature. Like, whoa, holy fuck nature, like I am small.
Your end. I'm in southern Utah, and I'm now on the Elon Musk Starlink, so it's full on Gotham mode where like
hell yeah,
my portal
I like to pretend you're on the run from the law.
Yeah, so I'm using Sirius satellites from the richest man on the planet so we can do this.
Well, I feel like a piece of shit. I'm using an $80 microphone, and I'm in Austin with every other white podcaster known to man.
We can make it work. Work. It's good to see you. It's been a while. How you been
doing? I know,
doing?
Man. You too. It's good to see your fucking face. I'm good. I'm really good. I mean, I was really bad. Right? Yeah. I feel like my life goes from rock bottoms to creative inspiration to then very good to, I just got to keep doing this, to then another rock bottom, repeat.
Well, I mean, do the rock bottoms get a little less rocky or bottomy? Are they starting to you want to decrease the variance of the wavelengths, I think is the idea, because you're going to have the waves.
Yeah. Well, so this one came from a breakup, and she just informed me I'm the only one of her exes that she hasn't blocked afterwards. So that means I'm doing something right. You know what I mean? That means I'm still, I'm learning. I'm not blocked. So like, that's good.
Good. Breakups are really, that's some of the hardest stuff. So, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, it gets the best of us and it turns us into the worst of us. It's a thing.
Yeah, man. And like, what I've been trying to do, because it's wild. I was thinking about this because, she wanted to be friends, and your instinct is like, that's gonna hurt too much. But it is wild that so many people who we have loved unconditionally, who we have imagined getting married to, who we have secret pet names and inside jokes and wake up next to, in a day, suddenly, like, that person's fucking blocked. Fuck that person. I never want to see their face. I can't watch The Sopranos because we watched that together. Like, and it just turns into this they have to disappear thing where you are eternal sunshining them. And where I'm landing is, you know, I don't know if we're meant to be monogamous. I don't know. Like, I'm a stupid romantic. I try, but I know there are lots of problems with it. What I would like to think is that even if you have these short-term relationships, even if you have these hard breakups, it would be much nicer to be able to look back on all of them with some sort of reverence, right? Like, you know, me and her, the breakup was super messy and kind of out of nowhere. But also, you know, she told me this is the first relationship she felt safe and she felt respected. And for me, it was the first relationship that I really felt like loved. And we both learned that, like, we weren't ready for a relationship and we fucking moved too fast and all this stuff. So as much as it hurts, it's like, well, those are good things. You know, I'm hustling more with comedy ever. And I realized it's because I'm not throwing everything into a relationship. Like, those are good realizations. I don't think I have to be like, fuck Amy. Like, it's good.
Look, I mean, we do dances with people, whether they're our whole lives or a few minutes. And it's sort of like these little soul dances we do. And it doesn't change the fact, though, man, that there's I like to think that relationships are really the crucible of a lot of our work as people, as souls, because there's really nowhere to run. It's everything gets exposed. So it's good. Look, you can run, but you can't hide. Like, you can do it now, you can do it later. It's all good. There's no timeline, but it's that's where a lot of the work is done.
No, dude, if I'm going to call myself out on my bullshit, I'm so glad you said that because, you know, me and you became friends over COVID because COVID was when I started. It was the first time I was ever single, and I was like 37. And it was when I started doing mushrooms and making this music and meditating and found Ram Dass. And so, like, naturally, like, we become friends. And in my head, when I moved to Austin, I was like, all right, I did it. I worked on myself. I meditate now. I am clearly ready for a relationship. You know, you hear so many people go, oh yeah, I was just single for a year and then I found my wife. And, you know, I got to Austin, I looked at my watch and I was like, yep, it's been a fucking year. Let's go. And it was still same versions of the bullshit I've done before. It was still moving too fast. It was still latching on, being codependent, being insecure. And I mean, the difference was, like, now that I meditate, I'm like, oh, I see I'm doing it. But, like, I was still doing it. And, you know, and
that's a
and
big
now,
deal, though.
It is. It is, because now I'm like, okay, I can be conscious of it going in, as opposed to when we started the relationship, I was like, I'm fucking enlightened. Let's go. Here we go.
Everyone is at the beginning of a relationship. They are completely like, this is it. The world has changed. Everything's
She's different. I'm different.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
I know. Well, you know, and you're still in a happy relationship, right? Before I bring that up.
Of course, yeah. Rada and I have been together now, I don't know, 4+ years. But I think, you know, when you're older and you've been around the block, you realize that relationships are very rich, and they're not something that's always just flying high. And actually, like, for myself personally, what I like and enjoy and kind of aim for is that sweet middle, that kind of not boring, but just like it's. I don't like the highs because they actually scare me, because I'm like, oh, if we're going to have crazy highs, like, I know that's not sustainable.
Dude.
And she's a very, like, bhakti yoga, like, she, you know, when we first got together, it was very ecstatic, and I was afraid because I was like, well, this isn't going to last. And you know what? She still says that shit, you know, to me 4+ years later, which is so beautiful to kind of like hold that light, to be like, you can embody those highs and not be afraid of it. You
right.
Just
well, it's
say
funny.
It. You know?
I did a sketch on Instagram about that once, where it was like, the gist of it was like, hey, have you met someone and you're in love immediately and the sex is incredible and passionate? Run, get the fuck out of there. You're trauma bonding. You're fucking, it's toxic. It's going to be toxic. And you're totally right. And, the reason I brought up you and Rada is because you do see a relationship like that. I do, as like an artist, as a romantic, and you go, that's it. It can exist. You want this person who, you can create with, who you both understand each other, who, is spiritually aligns. And I think my problem is, because I've been insecure, because I haven't known what I've wanted, I've attracted people who are kind of in the same boat. And, I don't know if you've gotten this before, but I've definitely had women who are attracted to like the idea of, an emotional artist who's going to help them quit their corporate job. And, they can come on the podcast with me or make things. And then they see it's hard and they're like, oh, this isn't fun. And because I've been codependent, I'm like, oh, I can take care of you. I can nurture you. I can get you out of that. As opposed to, it sounds like with you guys, it's like you both had solid shit going on and you both had some sort of spiritual grounding or foundation. And so then you could elevate each other, which I guess is my goal now. Like, that's what I'm looking for. But really, I just need to throw myself into art, because I just saw like, yeah, man, I'll still give it all up for a girl in a fucking heartbeat.
Like, Rada's a boss. I mean, look, it's easy on that level because it's like half the time I'm just trying to keep up with her. And
right.
So if anything, it's like we're both very ambitious, like, and people who like to do a lot of things, and we get really busy. So I think our work together is often like recognizing that it's really all just Maya. It's all just a show. And we need to take the time to not do, to just have repose.
Yeah.
And I mean, we all need that these days. But for her and I, our personalities definitely have this element of being very driven.
Yes.
And sure, it helps you succeed in sort of worldly things, but as we all know, there's a cost. And that is a sickness in itself, to be addicted to accomplishment and just doing.
I know. And there's part of me that's like, well, there's part of me that knows it's good, where it's like, hey, I'm focusing on me. Like, I've had more successes career-wise in the last 2 weeks since this breakup than I have in years. And I know that part of it is that I'm focusing on myself, but I also kind of low-key know that part of it is I'm just becoming addicted to the work instead of...
It's the new relationship.
It's the
your
new
work,
relationship.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the infatuation. But tell me, so you did move. You're in Austin, so you made the move to the Mecca of this is where it's all happening.
I guess.
What? Tell me about it. I mean, why'd you move, and how's it going?
Yeah, so I was at a point. So most of my career was spent in New York. Got a divorce, did the mandatory like LA time. Didn't love LA. And right before COVID, I moved to kind of like the mountains in Arizona. And it was the first time it was the first time I was single. It was the first time I didn't live in New York or LA. And I fucking loved it. And to be honest, if I was still in LA during COVID, I don't know how my mental health would have handled it.
No doubt, man.
I love being a progressive guy in a conservative state. It's the best. Like, low-key, like, I'll still fucking vote for Bernie Sanders, but I'm like, oh, I'm allowed to go outside and I can shoot a gun? All right, yep, let's do it.
It feels more punk rock or something. It's like, I'm counter. Yeah.
Isn't that weird? I was doing I did a show in Houston, and there were these three, I've never told this story. There were these three little like anarchist looking kids in the front. They were like 21. They had like their like Misfits hoodies on and like piercings, and they looked like morose and stuff. And I go, so you guys like tell me, like, what's it like being like the liberals in like Houston? And they were like, fuck liberals. And I was like, what? You look like you're like undercover Antifa agents. And these motherfuckers are like, hey, you want to go do DMT and listen to Ben Shapiro and talk about the free market? Like,
that's how it is now. That is Austin. You just summed it up right there.
It was so wild. And but man, I mean, it was the first time that I was just like, okay, yeah, this freedom shit is important. And don't get me wrong, you know, I did when people were like masks will protect people, or I lived in a community with a lot of old people. Like I did my thing. I did what I thought was going to help people, or what I was being told was going to help people. But I could go outside. I could go, you know, I wasn't completely locked in. And it was one of the best years of my life. I mean, it was the most creative I felt. It was, like I said, like having these psychedelic experiences, being out in nature, being in just a quiet space. And then it got to a point where I thought, you know, maybe, and I think maybe I did this for the wrong reasons, but I was like, maybe I'm playing too small, but I didn't want to go back to LA. And so Austin sort of seemed like this middle ground of there's nature, there's good people, there's freedom, and there's a thriving artistic community. You know, I didn't pack my bags to be like, I got to get on a Rogan's Club, or I got to, you know, it wasn't like that. You know, I mean, I'm friends with a lot of the people you're friends with, the kind of like Aubrey tangential, whatever, but Aubrey adjacent, like Kyle and those guys. So I knew I had community, and I knew there was good jujitsu, like stuff like that. It was definitely more LA than I thought it was. Not to like shit on it.
Most of LA moved there.
That's what well, and if I'm being honest, it's almost worse because they think they're above LA and they shit on LA while being exactly like LA. So like there are people that they have like bumper stickers that are like, you know, don't California my Texas. But the guy's on the way to like his podcast studio, or like, you know, and you're just like, come on, bud, you're doing the same shit.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy for you. I'm happy that you've made a change, and it sounds like you've got some cool shit going on. I mean, you sent me this song, and I know it's something that you've been kind of kicking around for a while, this idea of sort of soul coughing-esque spoken word over jam music.
I like that comparison. Yeah.
I gotta say, man, I listened to the track. It's all mastered and finished. It sounds fantastic.
Dude,
the drumming. I just recorded some drums recently. It's very hard. I mean, look, I'm guessing that was done by a professional. They know what they're doing, but it's still the drums sound really good, which is not easy to do, especially when the drums are playing a lot of stuff, and the drummer is fantastic.
Yeah, so the drummer's
got this
name is
acid jazz thing going on, almost like psychedelic. It's
So-
just going.
dude, so I'm really proud. Like I don't play, so I'm a musician, but I don't play on it. I just do the spoken word. But I put together like the band, and you know, I grew up on like Fish and the Dead, and like, but also like Tool and John McLaughlin and like weird shit. And so my idea, I wanted to put together a quote unquote super group, but a fucking weird one. So all of the orchestration is this guy, Chris, from that like hard rock band Under Oath. But he also does like film scoring. The bass is O.T.O. Burbridge from Dead and Company with John Mayer, the new Grateful Dead, and Allman Brothers. But that drummer, that was like my like fucking ace. So his name's Eric Harland. He's a jazz drummer from New York, and he used to play with McCoy Tyner, Coltrane's piano player. And he's so humble. He's such a fucking humble, cool guy, even though, yeah, like Mayer's a fan of him and Questlove and all. But he's just like the chillest dude. And we became friends on just Instagram because all of this was recorded separately. I hadn't been in a room with any of these guys. And Eric sends me the first take on that was really chill drums, just like in the pocket. I mean, tight, but like really chill. And in my head, I wanted a jazz drummer because I wanted someone to go ape shit, like crazy jazz drums.
Did he record that himself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
so
like get this guy's number.
Dude, it was wild. Yeah. So I laid down the track almost as a poem. Then Chris did all of the orchestration over it. Then he sent the orchestration back to me. I re-recorded the vocals so I could like do it a little more with like a little more musicality. And then we just sent it to Eric. He laid down the drums. Yeah. So the first track was, or the first take was pretty chill. And then I just called him and I was like, hey, just for fun, can you do one where you go fucking insane? And he's like, all right. And then he sent back that one. And we were like, that's the one. And then we sent it to O'Teal, who, channeled God and just fucking one take improvised, played over it, and then that's the track.
It reminds me a little bit of like a heavier Birdman soundtrack. Remember Birdman, the movie with Michael Keaton, which is an amazing soundtrack. It's just
the whole thing.
Drums,
it's one of the only
jazz drums.
That's it. I mean, this dude is literally incredible. There's one more track that's like much heavier that I can send you if you want, all about like music, and he waits till about halfway through, and then the way it kicks in is actually very Birdman-esque, like very like echoey snare, like it's just so intense. I mean, the dude is phenomenal, and that's one of the things. Like, I'm heavy in with stand-up right now, and I'm trying not to get my hopes up with this music project, even though the musicians that I really respect who have heard it so far really like it. But one of the reasons that playing music is such a dream of mine compared to stand-up is I love putting shit like this together. Like, I love the collaboration. Stand-up's very isolating. And it's almost like the sadder you are, the more of a loner you are, the more of a fuck up you are. You kind of get revered for that because you talk about it on stage. And, with music, there's something so beautiful about lifting each other up and adding to, it's the whole yes and thing. Sometimes with comedy, someone will be like, hey, do you like Joe? And you're like, yeah, I like Joe. And they're like, oh, well, Joe just got, a TV Comedy Central special. And you go, fuck Joe, But when you're playing music with someone, there's not as much, I mean, maybe you'll tell me there is, but it seems like there's not as much jealousy or animosity. Like, you have to put your ego in check a little bit because you are playing with other people and you are trying to build things together and you want it to sound as cool as possible. And, this started because I kind of started to do some more spoken word sounding stand up in my act. And one day I just asked someone to jam with me and play music with me. And it made it so much more fun for me. Even if you watch me on Conan, like years ago, when I start going into this rant, I'm tapping my foot at times. Like, it's always been very musical to me. So the idea of being able to take a poem or a rant or whatever and doing one with you and then doing one with a jazz drummer and then doing one, I got to open for like Talib Kweli, like doing one with like a hip hop beat or doing one with kind of maybe like a sadder, slower song. That's just so exciting for me as an artist. And then because there are also going to be some jokes in there or some like comedic lines or whatever, how can you use comedy as almost an accent, as almost like a high note in a guitar solo and not make it like jokey? Like, I never wanted to do comedy music. Like, hey, you guys know that Beach Boys song? Here's a version of it. If we switched out this word.
It's a difference between like Weird Al, which I'm not denigrating, and like, I don't know, Carlin, who's musical,
He's very musical.
Yeah. And it's a monologue. So I totally get it, man. And, what you're speaking to about the collaborative nature, I mean, I actually don't get that a lot because I'm a solo artist and I do work with other musicians, but there's a big difference between on one level being completely solo and the other is like people add to your music and you're producing it and curating, mixing, which is fun. But the real fucking gem is like actually playing together. Yes. And then the next level gem is like playing together and improvising in the moment. I just did that for the first time in a long time with Peter Broderick, who's an artist. And we were in Ireland for a couple weeks ago, and we recorded for a week. And it just like was a flood of creativity. Like 12 songs came out in 1 week and each one was like one take. Yeah. And it was just complete, like, I was like, this is such magic being able to create in the moment with music and conversation with someone in little nuance and subtlety of like little things you're doing. And the other person is just responding and you're like, we don't have to say anything. We just That's know. It. And my God, it's such a good feeling creatively.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I always used to be embarrassed to say that like I used to, like I really like jam band music, but it was for that. It was for that. There is something so special about improv, even in comedy. Something will happen with an audience and you try to replicate it the next day by being like, oh, this guy said this last night. And like, no one really cares. It's just like, no, in that moment, you needed that time and that space and that audience and this microphone. And it just happened. And the audience knows like, oh, fuck, this is just for us. Or with what you were saying, you know, just playing off somebody. I mean, that just happened to me for the first time in a really long time. Oddly enough, you know, after this breakup, you know, I did what everybody did, which is Tulsi Gabbard found me a farmhouse to stay at in Hawaii. So I flew to the Big Island and take that, Amy, who just got bangs. And they would do kirtan every morning and every night. And I'd done kirtan before, but I'd never played. And
time out here. You're telling the truth. Tulsi Gabbard hosted you in Hawaii at some kind of kirtan house. This is her thing.
She just knew people. She knew people out there.
Okay. Oh, right. She's Hawaiian. Right. Yeah. And, and I'm Hawaiian too. So I was like, I'm going to get in touch with my roots and I'm going to become spiritual. And instead, all I did was text Amy. And then she said she wanted me back. And then I flew back and then she changed her mind. And it was a fucking mess. My God.
Should have listened to Krishna and turned my phone off. But I didn't. Lesson learned. And so, dude, you should have seen me. I look like fucking like inside Llewyn Davis with my stupid little acoustic guitar and backpack at the airport. It was awful. And so we do kirtan. And so the family let me play guitar. And look, I know it's supposed to be for God and no ego, but I would be lying if there weren't moments where I would just lock onto some riff because of what they were playing and because of what we were chanting and would just get so lost into it. And there'd be a moment I'd snap into it or snap back into it and just be like, oh, this is some of the most beautiful music I've ever played in my life. Have no idea. Could not tell you, could not replicate it, could not whatever. But it was just fucking, it felt so good. And you know, when you're improvising and you don't, you know, I'm not talking about you're sitting around a bonfire drinking like PBRs and it's like, okay, you solo, now I solo, now you. I mean, like, here's one melody that I'm locking in because it is the right melody to.
I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, do comics look at it in an analogous way of like the kind of comics who totally improv? Like I think like Jeff Garlin or Sinbad used to be that way, or versus someone who's like, no, my set is light and tight, and it's always, you know, highly crafted like a Seinfeld, or people just be like different styles. It's all good. Just
everyone's different. And, you know, I remember when I was coming up, as I'm sure you did with music, you try to replicate people you look up to. So I'd be like, okay, Dave Chappelle smokes weed, so I'm going to smoke weed before I go on stage. And then I would just stare at the audience and bomb. And I was like, nope, not for me. Or like Louis C.K. was known for he'd have an idea and he'd talk it out, see what hits, and then take the stuff that hits. And like, same deal. I can't do that. For me, even though I'm a podcaster and stuff, I'm a writer. I write funny. When I podcast, I mean, shit, we opened up and I'm like, I was dumped. Like, I want to talk about serious shit. I want to talk about God and heartbreak and shit like that. You know, for me to be funny, I need to write it out. And then that actually gives me permission to improvise, because if I do a joke that's pre-written and it kills, over that laughter, I can try to improvise. Here's a tag, here's a tag, here's a tag, because I'm riding on that confidence. Or if I just happen to, like, I did a show the other day that was all improv. That was like the bit of the show. And it gave me permission to improvise. Like, the audience would let you go with it. And then there was some stuff there that actually did so well that I'm going to take back and try to develop into a bit. Some people are really good writers. Some people are really good improvisers. I think having both is important, because no matter how much of a writer I am, I'm still at a comedy club where I'm going to have to deal with a drunk guy, or I'm going to have to deal with a bottle breaking, or I'm going to have to deal with fucking up a joke. And you need to be able to have that skill to, get out of it a little bit. I love improvisation. I mean, it's the coolest thing to me. And actually, this improv show I did last week showed me that I'm better at it than I thought I was. So I do want to try to do it a little more, and I'm starting to think like, I've been doing stand-up 20 years, but oh, how much of the writing stuff is a crutch because I don't want to go out into the audience. And, you know, I love improvising music. I'm so much better at improvising music than I am like, you know, here's a chart to play with, that I do want to do that more in stand-up.
Yeah, with music, it's really similar, man. I mean, for me, I've noticed that some of the recordings I've been making lately that I like the most are the ones that were improvisations in front of a live audience. And
Yeah.
obviously the ones with ceremony, where it's a medicine ceremony, that's the core of what I've been doing since the beginning. And that there's something special about when you really open yourself up to creating in the moment while it's being witnessed by others.
Yes.
Which is a very, like, talk about being like out there and exposed and vulnerable. I mean, maybe that's why it has a special sauce to it, because it's so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always land, but when it does and it is recorded, it's quite special. And lately I've got a handful of those recordings that I'm just like, what is the difference between something in a studio that's quite more thoughtful, and you go back to it and you tweak it and you add to it and you take things away, and that can be special too, but you can never quite be the same exact thing.
There's a reason nobody listens to the Fish studio albums, buddy. Like, you're right. It's totally that. I mean, do you ever, because this has happened to me, even just, I'll be playing guitar just with a buddy and just record it on my phone. Do you ever go back and listen to those, like those tracks recently, and suddenly a line that you play, it's your hands, comes on and it just melts you, where you go, holy fuck, that was me. Like, this is my thing. Almost like you're hearing it for the first time, or not like you're hearing it for the first time, but like this thing that almost seemed imagined while you were improvising it. Suddenly you listen back to it and you go, oh no, that's real. I get to make something out of that.
Yeah. Oftentimes in the moment of improvising, something might feel really simplistic or not that interesting. Yep. And then later on, I'll listen to it and it actually is like, oh, that is so tapped into the emotional center that almost like there's another being playing it. And I'm this guy, just like this human judging it. And I'm like, oh, this is hacky.
Yeah.
But but when the hacking judge is gone, actually forgotten. I'm like, what? I don't remember doing this. And now I'm just a listener. And I'm a soul listening to music. And I'm like, oh, that's really touching. You know, and they're different people. They're different beings. It's like, I'm in the way. I'm just trying to take away this judge that says like everything's crap. But that is art, where you're trying to curate at the same time to actually make decisions to be like, right, maybe that is hacky, or, you know, and it's a dance.
The hacky thing's so funny. That reminds me of like everyone who like shits on pop music. And it's like, oh, you mean the music that's so popular, it touches like everybody and people across like all spectrums, and it just like makes people happy and you know what I mean? Like, I mean, shit, that beautiful kirtan music, those lines I played, I mean, homeboy wasn't a musician. Like, he was playing G, C, and D. And would I be like, oh, I guess that doesn't count because it's G, C, and D? It's like, no, man, it was just all of us together is what made that so special. And it's hard. I mean, there are musicians sometimes, and people do this with comedy too. Okay, here's an example. So right now in my act, the jokes that I'm talking about the most that are crushing because I'm like feeling it so hard are about dating. If you told old Jamie, who every newspaper compared me to Bill Hicks, compared me to George Carlin. You know, I was talking about war under George Bush. I was talking about drones under Obama. Everything stupid that would get me banished from places is what I was talking about. That I would feel the most artistically satisfied talking about dating. I'd be like, oh, you fucking hack. Like, why are you doing personal, that?
You know?
But that's it. Is I'm not talking about it in a like, hey, women are bitches or men don't put the toilet seats. I am talking about the actual struggle. You know, I mean, the reason I started talking about the breakup with you on a podcast is because that's what I'm thinking about right now. And that's what's like emotionally hitting me right now. And so if you can do GCD in a way that is true to that moment, if you can talk about dating or there's probably an airline food joke that's subversive that somebody could write, you know? I think just you hit it where it's what is authentic. And if it's authentic, it's fucking art right there.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is such a, I mean, that's what makes it, art so cool and interesting is that on one level, there's a difference between sentimentality and it's being emotional. And
Yeah.
I always am, I don't want personally to just ride sentimentality, but I do want things to be deeply emotional. And there's something about it, like having to be like what you don't do and how you put your own voice onto it or into it, I should say. And that's something I've always been really interested in. And I would imagine with comedy, it's really similar or all art. But that's kind of what makes something a bit more surface level or schlocky is when I feel like it's just sentiment as opposed to
Right.
depth, which is
Yeah.
easy. Anyone can say like, oh, let you paint it blue and it's sad kind of thing.
Right. And so with comedy, it'll just be, let's say, stereotypes, right? It's just like some like easy hacky race stereotype thing versus a subversive look at how we talk about race, right? Like there's a difference between somebody who just says the edgy words to get a crowd reaction and someone who is actually invested in figuring something out. Like that's my favorite kind of comedy. Like this is fucked up, right? And everyone goes, this is fucked up. You know, like I have a joke about porn right now, and there's a ton of hacky jokes about porn. There's a ton of hacky jokes about, you know, just being like a sad comic looking at porn. And like my premise is essentially, when did porn get so mean? And this idea that I'm getting older now and it's hard to just find normal consensual sex. And
Right.
like literally you go to the front page of Pornhub and it's like, watch us trick this dumb slut into a van. And like the joke is like, no,
It's
like,
horrible.
and the joke is, yeah. And the joke is like, I just want to come. I don't want to be accessory to a crime. But then it goes into, and this is true, and I won't do the bit, but like it's true where it's, if I turn 40 next week, 2 weeks. And I already feel sad and dejected watching porn alone. But if I just want to watch normal, like non-stepsister, like whatever porn, you actually have to type in porn for ladies, like, or porn for women. And so like, I'm talking about that experience of just, and that it does well, not because people are like, oh, porn. It does well because it's like, oh, this is such a sad thing that seems like it's just my experience, but also in the audience, you're seeing other people go like, yeah, like that's my experience too. And I think that's how you can make any topic interesting if you make it personal. Like, this is how it affects me. Whereas the sentimentality would just be like, hey, we all saw this thing. Isn't this thing stupid? Right? Like, you know, like Trump joke. That was another thing. I've been so political my whole career. I didn't really have any Trump jokes because I'm like, everyone's doing it. If I get up there and just go, that guy's orange or he's fucking fat, like, who gives a shit, right? I only want to talk about it if there's something interesting or different, or I would rather do a bit about if I secretly liked Trump, because that to me would be more interesting and vulnerable than just like, yeah, no one likes that guy. Like, we know.
Yeah, man. There's some clues in there about being genuine to like our own truths. I mean, as you're saying all that stuff, I'm just thinking about what is obvious to us, but also it's so obvious that it bears exploration. Just this horrific, strange techno future that we take for granted and are walking full force into with the porn and the phones and the social media and the collapse of the world, while something else is arising too. But it's just so fucking crazy and hard and strange, and making art at the same time. You know, I've been doing a lot of touring, and I have a lot of conflicted emotions, like when I'm on the road, and sometimes you're really at low points where you're just really tired and something's not going well, or I lost your bag or whatever it is. You're just like, what am I doing? Like, what are we doing? Why am I on these? Why? I mean, I can sit here and rationalize, but amidst it all, it's hard to know sometimes what to do. And the last thing I'll say about this is I've repeated this phrase a lot lately. Matthew Fox, who's on the podcast just a few weeks ago, great theologian, and he said, when someone has a mystical or numinous experience, the only rational response is either silence or art. And so in some
Oh,
ways, because
Jesus
I don't know,
Christ.
because I don't understand what to do, it's like, what else can I do but just make art? Because
That's it.
it's like when we said you're playing something that seems hacky for my brain, but actually something is speaking through us all through creativity
Yeah.
that is needed beyond ways I can understand right now in comedy, in music. Just it's the creative force saying, it's like things coming through the cracks in the sidewalk that's decaying.
Yeah. So I have a personal thing on that, and then I want to circle back, if I remember, to the technology point you brought up compared to live audiences. But the personal thing is, so I have a friend, this guy Paul Provenza. He actually had Carlin's last interview in this book he wrote all about like satire. And Paul and George Carlin's daughter worked on a show together called The Green Room, and that was the first TV show I ever did. They discovered me. So it was Kelly, Carlin, and Paul. And I was talking to Paul the other day. I was really struggling after this breakup. Like, I thought this was it. You know, she was the one, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, you need to be doing comedy every night, even if it's open mics.
Mm-hmm.
And he made this point, which is true, which is, you know, I had a really messy affair 10 years ago and a divorce, and I disappeared. After this breakup, I went to a fucking farm in Hawaii. My default defense mechanism has always been to run. And it's because I've felt helpless or been suicidal or whatever. Or I'm like, I just need to change, or I'm going to be homeless, or I need to, you know, whatever. And the point he made, and I'm seeing this as a sign that, you know, you brought up it even more. I mean, you brought it up in a beautiful way. Paul probably called me a pussy, but he's like, you're running from the thing that is going to be saving you. It should be saving you. Every time you have a breakup, every time you run away from comedy, when that is when you need to double down. That's when you need to be making art. And it was just, man, for someone, me, who's been so preachy about art for so long, it's crazy that I let fear override it. And I would just, run away from the thing that could be my savior, that could help other people. I mean, the other day on stage, I'm doing the dating jokes, and I just started improvising with an audience member who went through a breakup about my breakup. And it was so cathartic for me and the entire audience. And just because I was being open and vulnerable, and I was like, right, shit. That's what this is supposed to be. You know, me and Chris just started writing a new track. And I was like, I'm going to write it about being suicidal, and I'm going to make it funny, and I'm going to make it relatable, and I'm going to make it hopeful. And it just, like, again, started coming out of me, as opposed to so many times sometimes I've run away in a relationship. That was this last relationship. She was like, take a break from comedy, just like move in with me, and like, we'll make stuff together. And I was like, that's great. And I just surrendered everything that I was making on my own because I was getting the validation of this like really cool, beautiful girl. And I'm still a 16-year-old boy at heart who feels rejected and who wants love. And so, I mean, bro, like, again, almost 40, I feel like for the first time ever, when things are crumbling, I'm running towards art instead of away from it, which again is so obvious, but you forget how scary that can be sometimes. And this has been like the best couple weeks of my life after I was completely rock bottomed out about the girl.
I mean, if anything, I would say just always just run towards art. You know, the good times and the bad. It doesn't have to be like the savior for the tough. It's like, it just see it as a vitamin that is helpful all the time.
Right. Well, and I think too, like, it's shining a light on, I have a lot of imposter syndrome, and you wouldn't think so. I've done some of the coolest shit ever. I've worked with the coolest people ever, and dropped out of high school, started doing this at 17. But I think when you walk away from art in those moments that you were talking about, that you need to run towards it, that's enough time for your brain to go, oh, you were always kind of shit, or you were always kind of a failure, or you just coasted, or, you know, Robin felt bad for you, like whatever it is. You'll make up these crazy stories. And then, you get back on stage, whether it's in front of 10 people or 1,000, and you just go, oh, wait, fuck, I'm good at this. Why haven't I been doing this?
Yeah, it's a good reminder. But I did want to ask you before I forget. So this track, is it like, I'm assuming you did this for fun, like you wanted to do it, but what are you going to do with it?
I mean, my dream, what I'm going to do with it is, so we have 3 tracks right now. And we're just going to release it ourselves, me and Chris from Under Oath. And, Under Oath just got back from this really massive tour. And, I would like to make it an album. I would like for this track to hit or the next track to hit. And I mean, between all of us, I mean, they're tapped into the biggest music people in the world. It'll take one person to be like, oh, this is dope. Share. And I know it's different and I know it can be special. Nothing like it exists. And what would be really fucking cool is to be able to, just like we were talking about with improvisation, is have one track with Oteil and this jazz drummer, then have another track with like Chris's friends from like these big pop punk bands or, hardcore bands, then have a track with like you and Trevor Hall, then have a track, originally me and Trevor were going to do it. And these lyrics I actually wrote for Trevor. And then Trevor got busy, or maybe it was when they were like having their kid. But Trev just got slammed. And I just randomly, I was like, oh, this dude from Under Oath follows me on Twitter. And so I sent it to him as well. I sent it to you.
Everything.
It was all timing.
I mean,
but like, I think that would be.
Do you know Kate Tempest?
Who is that?
Kay Tempest, formerly Kate Tempest.
No.
Oh, bro. This would be like your soul other. They go by they. And Kay is fucking incredible. UK-based spoken word. I'm not sure if they do the music side. I don't know. I saw them play once at Treefort Fest actually, and incredible.
Oh, I'll check it out. Yeah,
pretty like right to the gut. Not a lot of comedy there, but as far as like someone doing that contemporarily on a top level in a really interesting and musically cool way.
Well, and that even just made me think, like, I'm thinking about me as the lead vocals, but that could be another thing. You find another spoken word artist and you can do quote unquote harmonies even with spoken word. I take a line, they take a line, I take a line, we both hit a line, whatever. Like, there's so much room that spoken word can go over any type of music. And then, like, I want to tour with it. I want to do this as a band, whether it's me, Chris, and Eric on drums, or, if Chris is too busy being famous, just do it, hook the shit up to, the soundboard, and then I just do it like a show, and I can tell stand-up stories in between the songs or whatever.
That'd be cool. Mix it in with a comedy set. It can be half and half. It can be back and forth. There could be a narrative. My dream forever. I mean, I played in bands before I did comedy. That's all I wanted to do. That I enjoy stand-up. I enjoy playing at comedy clubs. But if I could start playing or even opening or doing some fucking weird side stage at festivals, which I used to do with stand-up, and plugging this in, I think this shit would do great in the UK. I have friends my friend Tim Minchin went from doing musical comedy in little theaters to, winning Tony Awards. And like, he wrote like Matilda the musical, and just watching him elevate, because he's such a good musician. He wasn't just like we were talking about, like a wacky comedy musician. He was just like, he could be either seen as a pure comedian or a pure musician. Like, he was equally good at both. I would just love music to be a part of my career. Nothing makes me happier. I write a joke and I go, oh, that's cool. When I get to listen back to a song and put on headphones or put it in the car to drive around, like, dude, I don't rewatch my old stand-up. Like, I'll kind of cringe at it. I have listened to that fucking song I sent you a disgusting amount of times because I'm listening for Eric. I'm listening for the strings. You know what I mean? Yeah. You said I could play. You want me to play part of it at the end of this?
You can play the whole. You can play the whole song for sure.
All right, cool. I will. People will enjoy that. And then when do you think it may be out?
Okay,
if they want to listen to it on like a Spotify or something.
Yeah, so that would actually really help you guys. So I don't know when you're going to release it, but we are planning on releasing it next week. So it'll be on Spotify, it'll be on Apple. You'll be able to get it. Cool. You'll be able to share it on social media. The band's going to be called Light Scale. So LIGHT and then Scale, SCALE. So it'll be under Light Scale. And then I'll be posting about it. Oh my God, this dude that Chris knows made like a visualizer, which almost looks like a fucking music video. It's like super trippy. So I'll post that on my Instagram as well, which is at the Jamie Kilstein.
Right on. Yeah, the reference I made to Soul Coughing, a band that's not around, obviously. I mean, I think the lead singer still makes music a little bit, but I really like them. And their Ruby Vroom, one of their first records, might have been their first.
Yeah.
I remember seeing them when I was like in college. And
yeah, I feel like I saw them open for like Dave Matthews or something, but I never
Yeah, and I think they got like a major label deal, and they did another record. It wasn't as good, and it kind of folded. And it makes me sad that they got eaten up by that machine. But it was such good live music, like great drummer, upright bass, and this guy on one of those like old Mac 2SE. You remember those, like the little Macs, the very first ones? And he was like ahead of his time, and he was like doing like MIDI stuff with a keyboard. And everyone's like, "Look, he's playing a computer." Yeah. He's a wizard. And it was amazing. And they were ahead of their time. And that's a jamming record.
Yeah, man. Well, and that's what I said I wanted this project to be when I was like thinking about it. And me and you were even talking about it. I pitched it to like just the musicians in my life that I look up to, which is I wanted the music to be so good that if you take the spoken word out, you can still jam to the music. And then
that's key.
Yes. And then I wanted my lyrics to be so good that if you want to listen to it and focus on the lyrics, you can just do that. But you can do both. And one doesn't override the other. I didn't just want basic chords behind me, rambling, because then it's just stand up with a guitar. I was like, I want the music. Like, so sometimes on these new tracks that Chris and I are writing, Chris will send me the music first instead of me being like, hey, here's a poem or a rant or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And so that's why I wrote this depression one. It's this really dark kind of Christopher Nolan sounding thing. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to write the suicide thing over. And then it builds. So it gets very, I wouldn't say uplifting, but like kind of. And so I got to be a musician, even though I'm writing spoken word, and be like, this is what this makes me think of. I get to structure it around the song, and I want to do more shit like that too, where someone could just hand me a piece and I'm like, okay, this makes me think of this topic or whatever. But like I said, you put me on mute. That's why I was like, I don't just want pre-programmed drums. If we can get this fucking insane jazz drummer, let's do that, because some people are just going to focus on him, and I'm cool with that because I'm just fucking focusing on him.
Yeah. Well, I'm serious. I'd love to get in touch with him just to, I always like to have drummers in my back pocket, especially ones who can just record themselves and get good sounds. That's not easy to do.
Yeah, dude. He's a fucking, I will absolutely, I'll make that introduction. I can do it on email.
Yeah. I've been working on some music lately. Like I said, I recorded drums, and so I've got like half a dozen songs with drums on them, and it's been tough, but it sounds really cool. And I need to do a few more.
Yeah.
And so I've been like making little piano things, and then we throw drums on top of that. And it's kind of a jazz drumming style, a little hip hop in there too. And
nice.
I fucking love the sound of well recorded drums.
Me too, man.
It's just so good.
It'll make it for me.
The old saying, like, your band's only as good as your drummer. I mean, it's kind of true with recordings too. Like, if the drums are total crap, the song can't really get beyond that.
Right. Well, I mean, drumming's like, you don't get more primal than that, right?
Yeah.
It like leads everything. I'm excited to hear, send me when you have it or when it's out, what you did in Ireland. That sounds fucking incredible.
I'm very excited about it. Like this morning, you were talking about like listening to your stuff in a car. Like, I was mixing it yesterday all day, and then this morning I'm kind of like just bouncing the mixes. So I'm listening to them for the first time and since yesterday, and I think I get really excited too when there's another person involved, like Peter, who's such a great musician, and just you're hearing like all this stuff I never maybe would have come up with on my own.
Yeah.
And so it's very exciting. It's just like, oh man, like listen to these cool sounds, like the mashup of our two ideas. And it's like, it's so new for me. And if that's the most exciting thing in any art is newness. The novelty of it is exactly what art is. It's like, wow, he made babies and these babies are so interesting looking. They're beautiful.
That's it. I mean, like for me, it's like, I'll say a line and I'm not marveling at like the crafting of the line. The line is just what I wrote. I'm like, that's easy. It comes out of me. And then suddenly you hear this like zhong, zhong, like weird keyboard thing like behind that line. And you go, oh, holy fuck. Like you just made me awesome. And like, that's what I want to listen to.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the best stuff, man, is when there's a couple cooks there and they're all adding in like the perfect little zhuzh at the right times. And, you know, great artists that I work with who have the most experience are the ones who know when to hold back and when to like push forward.
That's it.
And that is such a skill to be like, I got to hang here. And then it's like, because I saw something, this amazing super group at a festival doing a live cinema thing. And I was like really excited for it. But the problem was there was really no director. And so all it was essentially was people playing all the time for like an hour. And it needed someone being like, stop, you roll. Okay, you go now. Is this someone conducting a bit? Because it's usually not good when it's just everyone all at once doing their thing. You got to know when to hang back.
What's funny is that was actually the compliment I got at this kirtan, where I would find these melodies and I would, you know, raise the stakes a little as they raised it or pull back as they pull back.
The kirtan stakes.
But everyone like thanked me afterwards because they were saying that so many times when you give a new guy a guitar, they just fucking like rock out and like we'll just start just blues jamming, just soloing over it. And that is such a funny image to me if someone's just like, I'm gonna fucking really rip it for God. And like, you know, where to me, like, kirtan is it's such a good metaphor for, I mean, just music in general, where it's like, no, we're all building a thing together. Like that.
Yeah.
There's actually this great, I was giving someone comedy advice and he started improv. And, you know, for you guys listening, improv, when you go to see an improv show, there'll be maybe 5 or 6 people on stage and they're doing like scenes, like more like sketches, right? So they have to help each other and assist each other. And where improv doesn't work is if me and you are doing a scene and you go, we're in space. And then I just try to be funny. I go, no, we're not in space. He's a fucking idiot. He's mentally ill. Like, and suddenly I'm trying to be funny and wacky and I'm just shitting all over.
I have a gun in every scene. I have a gun.
Yeah. And so,
oh, great. You've got a gun.
Yeah. All right. I guess this fucking scene's done.
Hands up.
Yep. And so there was this guy who was on SNL and he was on 30 Rock, named John Lutz. And apparently when he auditioned for SNL, it was at Second City in Chicago, and he didn't really have any big moments. Everybody else on stage was trying to like just crowbar in their best characters, their loudest voices. Somehow they're doing an impression, even though it didn't, you know, and it was killing with the audience. The audience didn't know. And all this guy did was he would edit the scene when the scene was over. He would tag in when someone needed assistance. He would be the straight man and feed lines to make the other person look good. And out of everyone, he was the only one that Lorne Michaels picked to be on SNL because it was like that, you know, improv comedy. I'm assuming like improv music isn't, I'm not the best guy. Again, if me and you are jamming by a campfire and you're ripping 12-bar blues and it's like, all right, Jamie, like hit a solo, it'll be fine. What I'm good at is finding melodies or dynamic changes or, you know, maybe it doesn't sound as fancy or it's not as fast, but it's about like, hey, we're all building something. And, you know, with comedy, when you're doing comedy with another person, it's not who's funnier. It's who's a better listener. It's, oh, fuck, you just threw me that little softball line. Like, I'm going to back pocket that for later, or I'm going to react to your line instead of chambering what I think is the funniest thing. And so much of it is just about listening. It's just about being present. Not like, oh, I have to be as wacky and loud as possible.
Yeah, there's a saying in songwriting about serving the song. And I was thinking about that a lot when I was working with Peter, because, sometimes you might be in a collaboration and think, oh, like I need to inject my voice here. Otherwise, blah, blah, blah.
I'm not
But there were many times he was doing something. I'm like, this is serving the song. And I want him to just keep going, keep doing your thing, throw that down, do more. And it's really a metaphor for life. It's about, serving the song of life. And, it's not always about like what we think will lift us up in the moment. It's about what's for the greater good of, this great song of creation. And
exactly.
It's a great way to think about things. And in some ways, a good way for us to start to round out our conversation as we're just thinking about all the ways that hopefully different forms of creation and creativity are helping elevate this greater song, which has all the different colors.
Well, and to kind of bring it back for your audience, for everyone listening, to when you were giving me advice about running towards art, I think a lot of people, I talk a lot about mental health on my podcast and on Instagram. And, you always hear people when they're talking about how to fix depression or what to do with mental health. It's like, get good sleep, eat well, exercise, meditate. But I really think that creativity needs to be up there. And that doesn't mean you have to play in a band. That means, one of the most creatively fulfilling moments I had last year, and last year was fucking hard for me, was I was broke around Christmas. So I did a broke person present for my nephews, and I wrote them a story. I wrote them a fictional story about how they're rescuing their fuck up Uncle Jamie from their evil principal. And it was like a 3-page fiction story. And dude, I don't know if I've ever made anyone happier with my art. And,
right.
My sister was like, you got to write children's books. And of course my brain went there, but then I was like, I could just write stories for them. I can just write a part 2 for them or whatever. And so even if you're not trying to be a touring musician or comedian, you can write short stories for yourself. You can write melodies and sing them on walks. Like, you can still do something creative every day. And man, I'll tell you, the days that I don't, just like the days I don't work out, like I feel it in my soul. And the days I make something, even if it's a little sketch and it fucking tanks on Instagram, I don't care. I made a thing and I feel good that I made a thing.
The act is the act. It doesn't selling it or sharing it actually is not as required. Even just free writing, like you said, making up songs as you're walking is the same effect. So it's
and that's actually how I know for the first time in my life I'm making the art I'm supposed to make. Where yes, when you ask me my goals for Light Scale, I'm like, God damn, I want to tour and I want to play this stuff in front of a live audience. But also, if it doesn't hit, writing these songs was one of the coolest things I've ever done. And so I already won. Or these sketches on Instagram, I've been like a preachy, yelly comedian and talked about drone strikes on Conan, but like sometimes making a silly sketch by myself in my bedroom that gets 2,000 views, it's like, well, that made me laugh that day. And that was something I was thinking about or upset about. And I don't really care about numbers anymore. I just want to make things.
The economy of scale, it's our own sickness. So it's a delusion in itself, man. It's like, I'm happy, man. It's good to see you. And I'm excited to share this song now with people. And then I encourage them to listen to it in a little higher fidelity on the streaming services.
And there will be more. So like if you subscribe to Light Scale or whatever you do on Spotify, we're probably going to put we'll probably put the second one up maybe next month. And then again, the goal is just like, if you guys can make enough noise about it to make an album, I'm like, I want to do spoken word stuff about breakups, about depression, about mental health, about, there's so many, about tribalism. Like there's so much shit I want to write about. So that would be great. And then also, if you like my voice, I have a podcast called A Fuck Up's Guide to the Universe.
Your voice.
Which you have been on, and O'Teal and Raghu Marcus and all those people. But also I just had like John Cleese from Monty Python, and the porn star Nicole Aniston came on to talk about breakups with me. And it's a really cool show. I'm really proud of it. And it's called A Fuck Up's Guide to the Universe.
Fun. I love it.
Fun.
Good to see you, my friend.
You too, bud. I'm proud of you. Let me know when you're in Austin, which I assume will be soon, because that's a thing you do.
I hope so. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah, we got to hug and play music, and we've never met.
I guess that's true. It feels like we have. That is true. It's just been this. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me know, or if I need to escape, I'll come to you.
Which is like mushrooms, but
Sounds
legal.
good, my friend.
Notes rock you back to a time where problems are just lyrics to be sung about at the top.
Thank you, Jamie, for coming on the show. And the song that you're hearing in the background is the God One. If you want to hear it without me talking at the beginning or in full and in higher fidelity, go check it out this Friday when it drops on all the streaming services. If it doesn't come out this Friday, maybe there was some glitch, but I'm going to assume it will. I really, really enjoyed this, and thanks, Jamie, for sharing it with us. Thank you again to everyone on our Patreon, patreon.com/EastForest, and hope to see those of you who can make it to Portland on May 15th, Los Angeles on May 21st, and there's some retreats at Esalen, July 1st through 4th, and late August with the Ram Dass folks in North Carolina. And we're also ticketed November 15th in London. So there'll be some more dates in Europe we'll announce soon. Just get on the newsletter or join us on social media, eastforest.org and at eastforest and at eastforestmusic. All right, you guys, you keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do it with grace.
Part of me hopes it was the shellfish trying to pull one over on humans by being like, nah, son, God said don't eat us. And then we listen because we are just human, silly little humans. That story would make me believe in God. Wait. Right. Laughter. I believe in God when I hear laughter, and not boardroom small talk, laugh at your corporate boss's shitty joke laughter, but the one that is still inside you from the first time you got high and watched The Simpsons with your friends. Laughter, truer than any fact you read in an encyclopedia. Laughter, the kind that taught you that rebellion can be found inside the right joke. God lives there too. Wait. When I was older, I was pushed further away from God. The one that likes laughter and music that he will conduct sunsets to. The one that's supposedly in the pretty buildings but more likely singing in the shower to Beyonce after a breakup, hand on your shoulder. God, not the one who doesn't understand sex, punishing women for it, being homophobic, and at best, an advocate for very boring sex. A tantra manual, the Bible is not, unless you are in the BDSM. That book is violent. My God is not. When will the people who start wars in God's name be sued for libel? Wait, right. Sex, good sex, makes me believe in God. Forget where you were born because it seems like you have only lived in this moment. Sex, connected to the earth, plugged in, circuit breaker, secured. Sex, so good it makes you understand physics and time travel, though you would never use that new power unless it was to bring you back to now. Up all night with the person that makes you believe in hope, and when you think it can't get better, the shuffle turns on Prince. Read the Bible like a cookbook. Take the recipes you like, make a copy, spray paint those words onto your hearts, then throw out the rest and put on Prince. If you hate in God's name, I hope you realize you read the book upside down. How can we teach kids? Right, kids. Wait. Sometimes kids remind me of God. I say sometimes because I'm more of a dog person, but sometimes kids, usually paired with laughter, will fucking do it. Think back to yourself as a kid before you knew what ego was, before your imaginary friend morphed into the voice inside your head that told you to stop taking chances, when you could crumble the crackers your mom gave you between your fingers, spread them over your high chair while giggling and call it a day. You didn't even know that hate was a possibility because the only possibility you cared about was everything. And naps. That child was you. That you was God. And when you forget, when you stop believing in good, listen to music. Fuck like your life depends on it, and then laugh. Laugh yourself into the forest you smashed your phone for, even if just for a second, and stand under the sun that can end wars if we let it, and listen. The answers are all there, obvious, like the cliches you ignore until you don't like now. I didn't believe in God until God didn't need me to. He just wanted us to be.